Hello and welcome to Women in Retail Talks. I'm Christina Stidham, Associate Content Editor at Women in Retail. I'm here live at IRCE at RetailX, and joining me today is Kirsten Mitchell, Senior Program Manager of Inclusion and Diversity at Amazon. Kirsten just finished presenting here at the conference in a session looking at marketing and culturally competent customer service with an inclusion and diversity lens. We're going to talk about that angle as well as how D&I improves teams internally and influences and improves companies on a larger scale. So thanks for taking the time to meet with me, Kirsten.
Of course, glad to be here.
First, I want to ask you to explain your position at Amazon and how you influence D&I efforts at the company.
So as the Senior Program Manager for Inclusion and Diversity across worldwide customer service, my job is to really understand the needs of our customers in our business, but more importantly, to understand the needs of our employees within that business and help them grow and succeed. We look at the employee life cycle under kind of an attract, develop, keep, and engage framework, and think about what things will help employees feel trusted, feel valued, feel connected to their company, and feel like they bring the right things to the table, and we give them the opportunity to be kind of the best versions of themselves at work. And that's a pretty large challenge when it comes to kind of a global organization.
Yeah, that sounds like a huge undertaking, and so you have a lot of experience in D&I and kind of focusing your efforts on kind of bringing up that talent and making sure everybody feels comfortable at your organization. What recommendations do you have for retailers and other businesses around D&I efforts, especially in regards to hiring and developing your current talent?
Well, I think the good news is there's a lot of companies that are doing amazing things out there, right? So there's no lack of information if you're really looking to try to create a change. And I think you can start as simple as your recruiting efforts and changing the how you do your recruiting, where you're recruiting from, which different platforms you look for, which schools you might go to, which expectations you might have of people in roles that they've held before, and how you're filling particular roles. But I also think we do a disservice when we think about D&I if we assume that only recruiting a more diverse set of people will change the challenge that we might have internally about lack of representation, for example. So one of the things we do think about, or I've thought about a lot, is how do we create the right spaces for people to grow and promote internally within our companies? So how do we create sponsorship in an effective way? How do we allow for both organic and intentional mentoring so that people get exposure in areas that they might not have otherwise, to build and develop talents they already have, and to fill in gaps in their own maybe learning. And then secondarily, are we looking at the numbers? And that's hard, right? Not every company has access. Not every company shares externally. But if we're looking at those internally, we can often see if we're making a difference or not. And research shows that if we're not looking at consistently, things don't change. So one of the recommendations I also have for HR professionals or operational leaders in the space is really looking to make sure that we don't stop the conversation ever.
Great, and I know that Amazon also offers employees learning experiences to further D&I. I know about the AmazeCon Gender Diversity Conference. Can you elaborate a bit more on events like this, why you focus on them, why they're important to Amazon?
I think for any retailer or any large business or corporation, it's really critical to make sure that we have conversations that show that the company themselves care about the issues at hand. So, for example, you shared AmazeCon, and another one that we had that I think there was live tweets and some Facebook and Instagram presence was recently CORE, which is Conversations on Race and Ethnicity. And both of those took place within our Seattle offices. For any company, it's important that we have a safe space for individuals to come together and talk about some of the challenges that they face in the workplace, but also to be educated, and educated in a space where there's a clear understanding that we all don't know what we don't know, that there's many things and experiences and points of view we've probably never seen, and to do that in a framework that allows people to process kind of the depth of feelings they might have about some of the things that they learned. So when we have our gender conference, that doesn't just explore kind of the typical gender dynamic, which we think of as male and female, but thinking about non-binary or our transgender colleagues, and kind of all the different ways that that spectrum can play out. And again, same with when we think about things like race and ethnicity. There's a lot of deep-rooted cultural thoughts and feelings around kind of what that means to any given individual, and trying to unpack that and talk through that in a really safe space is key.
That's incredible that Amazon offers employees such a space to really dive into that and work through how they might have felt and develop maybe new thoughts and experiences on acceptance. And D&I is a crucial aspect of a successful company and has been a growing focus specifically in the retail industry. Can you talk about how diverse teams benefit Amazon and how being inclusive is beneficial to all businesses and all teams?
Absolutely. I've been in kind of the retail space for almost all of my working life. And consistently you can see that teams that don't think the same way or come from the same space or have the same backgrounds often have a little bit more storming in that initial phase of there's a lot of push and pull as people try to find their right place and get their voice heard. But what we see traditionally is that teams that do that, once they get through that storm, tend to be more creative, more innovative, and move faster once they get over the curve. What that means for us with a global business or seeing any kind of large businesses succeed is that if we think about what people need to feel like they're part of that business and they have an impact, they're going to perform better. And so we can be quite a bit more innovative on behalf of our customer. And we've seen that happen through the number of ways that we, instead of forcing the customers to shop the way we think they should, we change some of the ways that they're able to interact with our sites and products, specifically because that's what they've told us they want.
Great. And just as you just mentioned, it obviously is an outward change for a company. It affects the customer experience, and strong D&I internally can definitely improve the customer experience looking outwardly. And just as you mentioned, as your products and your marketing reach a wider range of people, changes how people shop online. And you just spoke about this already here at IRCE. What is Amazon's goal looking forward in that outward customer-facing impact of D&I?
You know, it's interesting, but recently we had a team that was created that's called the Inclusion Customer Experience Team, or Inclusion CX. And their goal was really to create an intentional, genuine understanding of communities that might otherwise be kind of left behind or marginalized when it comes to the shopping experience, particularly around communities or customers of color. And so they've done a lot of market research, a lot of video interviews, a lot of really going out and understanding how individuals around the US and hopefully eventually the globe interact with our sites and our products and how people think and feel about the shopping experience. And when it comes to how people feel, we know from a retail perspective that when people have a good experience, they'll probably tell someone about it. If they have a bad experience, they're likely to tell 5 people about it, right? And so we have to get it right, and we have to be genuine about it and not artificial. And so our goal really has been to understand what people want and need, see how they connect with what we provide them, and then last but not least, use the feedback that people are gracious enough to give us.
Those are all great goals looking forward for Amazon, and I know that you guys are continually working to improve your D&I, so that is excellent. I'm curious for you personally, who are other leaders in diversity and inclusion efforts at other retailers, at other businesses, who you might admire, who you look up to for tactics, advice, strategy, and who you look for tips and best practices?
Well, I'd say I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my boss, Eddie Pate. He heads up inclusion and diversity for worldwide operations at Amazon, has been doing D&I for almost 20 years and has been a wealth of knowledge. But there's a lot of other amazing leaders in the space, even in the Seattle area, which is where I'm from. I was going to say most recently we had the opportunity to host Amelia Ransom from Avalara, who's their diversity and equity leader, and she is not only inspirational and interesting, but incredibly funny. So if you have the opportunity to hear from her, a lot of great insights there. Another woman I strongly admire in the Pacific Northwest area, whose company is kind of branching out into not just other areas of the U.S., but the world, is Dina Perot. She heads up a company called iUrban Teen, and most recently launched Black Women in STEM 2.0. Two really amazing kind of groups that are focused on growing both the younger generation and exposing them to STEM and the arts, but then secondarily bringing in a rather marginalized community together and providing a space for growth, opportunity, and exposure.
We talked about mentorship earlier in this interview, and here at Women in Retail, we really focus a lot on mentorship and how that can help women especially go throughout an organization. And I'm wondering who may your mentors be when you were coming up in the retail industry, all these years of experience, and how mentors might have influenced you to take on a D&I role.
Yeah, I'm exceptionally thankful. I spent the first 11 years of my career in the home improvement industry, and a woman named Zita, who was my HR manager about halfway through that period of time, saw something in me that kind of steered me down the human resources path, rather than continuing to grow in operations, although I know for a fact we need more women in ops as well. But D&I has been a personal passion, and over the last few years, particularly kind of starting out about 5-6 years ago, I came in contact with a leader in our learning and development space, Claudia, who was so passionate around kind of helping women in leadership, and particularly helping them feel as though they're not alone. They're not the only one experiencing some of the challenges that we've seen through books like Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, or much of the research that's coming out of companies like Deloitte and McKinsey, and helping women both explore the idea of the fact that they're not alone, but then what can we do about it as a company and an organization. And because of that, that passion, right, it allowed me to kind of focus some of the efforts I was doing internally in the HR field and kind of narrow down the focus that I had for my long-term career plans.
Great. It's so crucial to have somebody who really helps bring you up late and explore what you might not have realized that you're interested in. And what do you think is the future of diversity and inclusion efforts? Where are we going in retail and beyond, or other businesses, as far as D&I?
Well, I'd say D&I has been a conversation for a while, right? And probably a pretty consistent conversation for about 30 years, but even more recently, I think we see a lot more exposure, and a lot of that has to do with everything from the new way that media and podcasts like this one and other ways that people consume information from around us. I think what's going to happen is that companies that don't start thinking about diversity and inclusion as imperative to being successful in their business, whether that's staffing their companies, whether that's promoting people internally, or whether that's how they think about their customers and the products they provide, they're going to get left behind. They're going to lose the innovation and the creativity that comes from those diverse, inclusive teams. But secondarily, there's going to be swaths of the marketplace that isn't interested in working with them for one reason or another. And so I think for me, that's sort of like there's always a bottom line need, right? And the numbers show us pretty consistently. I really just Google the business case for D&I, and there's no shortage of information that shows us this is going to be a necessity going forward if people aren't doing it already.
Great. Thank you for talking to me about such a critical aspect of businesses and retail going forward, and currently as it's being improved and worked on at companies like Amazon. So thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and it was great having you on the show.
Thanks so much. Appreciate being here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Women in Retail Talks. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at wirlc.com/podcasts for show notes. Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.